following is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.
King Cole introduces us to Viewpoint, your program of personality, politicians, and perspectives. We're going to have all three today, but the emphasis is not on the politicians today. Although I think a minister has to be a doggone good politician to be a successful minister. You know,
probably a little.
There's definitely politics in church, no doubt.
My friend here, Gord Snyder, and we're having. I'll start with kudos. There must be a kudo.
All right.
No, I want to make a kudo to one of Henry's parishioners, Marcia Fernandez. Every Tuesday morning, the boys at the Christian Village get together for coffee, and Marcia shows up and brings some goodies, and we sit around and have coffee and some sweets at her leisure, and so. When it comes time for communion, offer a little extra up there, Henry, because she's a really nice worker. She does.
No doubt.
She does a great.
Doubt.
If she works for Eminence Christian like she works for us, you've got a real laborer in the trenches there.
Yeah, I wish you can come and hear her do our sharing of devotionals and call to worship. Very spiritually delivered, very deeply moving, and filled with the Word of God.
You can tell it's in her heart.
It's personal.
Go ahead and introduce our guest this morning, sir.
All right. Joining us from Eminence Christian Church is Pastor Henry Johnson. So thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So, Mr.
And
Gossett?
prior to serving the Lord and a great number of great people up there at Eminence Christian, Henry was in the correction system as a chaplain. And that had to be a very demanding position, Mr. Johnson. At the time when you retired, were they had a full complement of staff out there at the Golden Correctional Center?
And inmates, for sure. I can't remember the exact number, but well over 2,000 inmates, and then 3 shifts of staff, to manage the security of the facility.
Well, it's been an important economic factor in this community.
No doubt.
Really important.
No doubt.
And to some of the surrounding communities. We have a lot of guards and personnel there that are working at the Golden Correctional Center and Lincoln Correctional Center as well, coming from small communities next to Lincoln. And it's a huge thing. Did you have any one incident that stands out during your long career as a chaplain, Chaplain Johnson?
One?
Yeah, I suspect there's almost a daily career.
Yeah, I've mentioned on the program before that one of the blessings we had at the institution at Logan is having volunteers come in. But one group in particular was the Walk to Emmaus program out of Bloomington Normal. And they came for well over, 20 to 30 years providing retreats and religious training and fellowship with their inmates. They would come in and do a 3-day weekend retreat, and then every month they would come back to renewed fellowship. And they touch lives and help inmates to get reintegrated into society. That program is known as Great Banquet now. But back then, it was known as Walk to Emmaus, and they really were a blessing to my ministry there and to the lives of the inmates.
You'll recall that for quite a while ago now, volunteers would show up out there on a Saturday and assist the prisoners in reading books to their children.
Yes, storybook program.
Storybook program. And then for the benefit of the listeners out there, those the prisoners would read whatever book they selected from their own selection. There was a large selection of books there. And then there was a recording made of the prisoner reading to his. So they sent the book and the CD to the the family,
Yes.
which I thought was a wonderful program.
Oh, it was.
And one day I sat down there, and this fella had a marvelous voice. I think he was a lifer. He'd been there a long time. And he sang this book to his kids. I sat there and tears rolled up my eyes.
He sang.
He sang this book to his kids, and a magnificent voice.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, that's 15, 20 years ago. I remember that very vividly.
Yeah.
It's too bad they had to give up. There was I can't remember the name of the group that sponsored that. They came from Springfield, and I think they ran out of money.
But while they were able to do the program, inmates were blessed. It's very important for the mother and the father to stay in touch with their children, who they have to give up for however long the courts deem or have sentenced them. So Storybook was an excellent program that helped the parent, father or mother, stay in touch with their children. It was a blessing.
Yeah, and you know, it was kind of an interesting a bit of volunteering, seeing different. Well, for instance, the gentleman who sang to his kid, different facets of prisoners' makeup and their personalities, and I found it a very challenging and a very interesting way to volunteer a little time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of people may not be aware that there are. I mean, you think of the prison, you think of the inmates and the their living quarters and the guards being there, but there are a lot of additional facilities and services available, such as pastoral services, such as the library and so forth.
Oh,
to
yeah,
help,
and recreational.
Right, so that it's not maybe what you stereotypically think of when you look at the movies and see a prison film or whatever. So there are efforts and there are programs to help rejuvenate or
rehabilitate.
Rehabilitate. That's the word I'm looking for before the folks are back in society.
Henry, as we sit here and visit, is there currently a program for prisoners to take advantage of learning different skills rather than sit there in their jail and read all day long or whatever else they do in the course of their confinement?
Well, I've been gone for about, this is 2023, 17 years since I retired. While I worked there were programs that were sponsored by local community colleges. Of course, the GED programs to help inmates at least get a GED certificate if they dropped out of school. We had vocational programming and auto body repair, some carpentry, some welding, horticulture. So, yeah, there are other programs that young men and women were able to get involved with to prepare themselves to go back out into society.
What prompted you to go into the correction system as a chaplain? That to me, street guy doesn't know too much, as a special calling. And it certainly requires special skills. There's no question about that at all.
Well, I just call it divine guidance because I had not intended to go to work in a prison when I first came down. I was going to finish schooling, maybe go into psychology and go into a profession that I could make money. I love psychology and I love sociology, and after finishing my degree in theology, I was able to blend all three of those disciplines into a profession. I hadn't really thought of chaplaincy initially when I came down, but by the time I was finishing my Master's of Arts, they were opening up Logan Correctional Center at the old annex just south of town. And so I saw the opportunity to use all of those disciplines into effective ministry. I really wasn't drawn at that time to pulpit ministry. But once I finished my training in clinical pastoral education, which was a requirement for my master's degree, and I did that at Pontiac Correctional Center, I knew that was the perfect ministry for me. So that's how I got started.
Okay, all right. So is there a different what do I want to say? Is there a different approach you use, or a different mindset, I guess, as far as offering pastoral services to someone who is incarcerated versus a man on the street? Like, is there a difference in how you approach talking with them or discussing things with them?
The main thing that I learned going into the system is that the difference between people in prison and people outside in the so-called free world is that the ones in prison got caught.
And there's a lot of them on the outside that should be in.
That's essentially the difference. We all sin. We all have broken the law. If you've driven faster than 55 miles an hour when it was 55 miles an hour, or 70, or been given a speeding ticket for illegal lane change, we all have made infractions. Some more serious, of course, than traffic violations, but we're all human, given to sin, given to making mistakes, and given to making the wrong choices. And so my work with the men and women in prison was to remind them, you weren't born here. You were born and given the same talents as anyone else. You just made choices that ultimately brought you here, or your path was set for you to come here. And then when I would ever do tours with groups of people, they would come in, high school, college, I would tell them the difference between the men and women you see in prison and you, if you're breaking the law, if you're doing drugs, if you are date raping your girlfriends, if you are doing whatever the law says you shouldn't do, you're a criminal. You just haven't gotten caught. Okay? And so it's understanding that we're all human, given to sin or infraction. So my approach is the same. Okay? And very often we forget that men and women who are caught up in addictions or violent cycles of abuse, they're in prison long before they come to a physical place.
Yeah.
Like Logan.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of prisons. Drug addiction, sexual addiction, gambling, violence, domestic violence in particular. Those are very real prisons.
That's a thought that nobody goes across the street with. That's the guy screwed up, so put him in jail. You have to be a psychology major almost to be a good chaplain.
Well, that's what's one of the drawing factors for me. I love psychology, and my daughter eventually kind of developed the same love for psychology and ended up being a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So, yes, you do, because it's about human behavior. You know, why do we choose right sometimes and wrong most of the time? You know, but what's the process that you go through in making choices for life? Okay.
And while the folks are incarcerated there are several ways that they are sort of trying to be set on the right path. I mean, there's the pastoral counseling. I know my mom worked as a librarian in the prison a lot of time, and she had a variety of inmates that she dealt with, but I always thought she was crazy for wanting to work there. I'm like, man, what do you want to go work in a prison for? And she was like, well, coming to the library is a privilege, and they earn that. So the ones who are there are generally better behaved, and they're there for a purpose. And
which prison was she a librarian?
She was at Logan.
What's your mother's name?
Pat Kirby.
Oh, yeah, I remember Pat.
Yeah. So she was there, I can't remember how many years, but probably about 10 years, I guess. But yeah, she loved it. She enjoyed helping them because they were seeking knowledge and trying to better themselves, and she was all about wanting to kind of help guide them along that path.
Well, she was motivated.
Yeah. Unless you've worked in a prison or have been to prison, we get the notion that it's the worst place in the world to be. And in many ways it is. But for many people, while it's not a safe place to be, it's safer than the environment that they are living in. If they're into drugs or violence, or if they are homeless and forced to survive any way they can. Coming to prison gives a man or woman a chance to slow down, to eat right, to rest, to exercise. I never forget a time when the man showed me a picture of what he looked like as he was processed into the system. His mugshot was vastly different from the man standing before me. He said, "Chaplain, I didn't care whether where I slept, what I ate. All I was concerned about was getting the next fix."
Yeah.
He was in prison, the prison of drug addiction. But the man standing before me was clean, healthy, and very intelligent. Prison can save individuals if they allow it. Many times they would say, "Chaplain, I wasn't arrested. I was rescued," because it was just a matter of time before they would be killed or they would die.
You have to exercise a great deal of restraint, I'm sure, in talking with prisoners sometimes. Some of those guys and ladies are real con artists, and that's how they survived on the streets, is learning to be a con artist. And I suspect Mrs. Kirby saw some of that with
Sure,
with
I'm
her,
sure she did.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about early release, Chaplain Johnson?
Early release?
Yes.
Well,
It's a generic term, and I realize that.
no, but that's a good question, because when a man and woman are sentenced, when they are sentenced to a specific amount of time, I believe they should do that time. But all sentencing isn't fair. Case in point, now marijuana is legal.
Yeah.
We got a marijuana factory right here down the road, not too far from here.
And it's big. It's huge.
It's huge. And they're making, I don't know exactly how much, but I've been told
Tons.
they do quite well
Yeah.
with the manufacture of cannabis that's made into oils or whatever, recreational marijuana. I don't know. But there have been times in the past when a man could get 5, 6, 8 to 10 years just for possessing it. And it's political, we know it is, and it's tough when certain people go to jail for the same crime and others don't. You could go to jail forever if you sold crack cocaine in the inner city of Chicago. But if you're out in the suburbs or in the high-rise buildings of business in Chicago or cities like Chicago, if you were caught with cocaine possession, you got a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to get a slap on the wrist by our sponsors if we don't take some time. And then I want to visit, talk a little bit about Eminence Christian Church.
I'd be honored.
Right ahead, Mr. Rash. donations to our much appreciated sponsors. We come back to Viewpoint. Our guest this morning is Mr. Henry Johnson, a gentleman who served his community very well in a couple of capacities. Number one is a chaplain at the Golden Correctional Center, and that would certainly require a great deal of expertise and background in psychology, working with people who have been snatched off the streets and have an addiction problem. There's another part of the prison makeup is people with addictions, and that has to be a terrible disease, whether it's booze or sex or drugs. An addiction is a serious problem, and you have to know about how to go about that. And another way he's serving his community, Eminence Christian Church, and the reason I want to talk about that for just a minute, we're going to go back to the prison. I hope not very long, but Eminence Christian Church annually serves the veterans with a nice breakfast up there in the fall of the year, and it's all done by volunteers, and it's really nicely done. Tell us a little bit about Eminence Christian Church, Henry.
Well, I've been there about 3 years, but before that, I would pass this beautiful little church in the country, just going down the country road. Sometimes I'd go up to Sugar Creek Farm and fish, and then come back the long way instead of coming straight back to Lincoln. And I would pass the church, and I would say, wow, that's such a beautiful little church. I wonder who attends there, when it was founded. Had no idea that many years later I would be ministering to this little church after my time as a chaplain. I got called about 3 years ago, and met some wonderful people that I already knew because they worked in the prison. Others were neighbors, and we've just been a family ever since. Back in 1988, they had a sesquicentennial celebration, 150 years of existence. The church was founded about 1838. And then as the Eminence Township grew, they erected larger buildings. But back about, I think it was 1844, the church was visited by Alexander Campbell, one of the leaders of the Restoration Movement. Yeah. And then they built a building in 1856, thereabouts, and then by 1891, they erected a building that was much larger as the township grew. It would seat about 600 people.
My goodness.
But tragically, it burned down in about 1901, and then 1902, another building was erected, the building that currently sits at the corner of 1605 2500 Street, where we worship now. It replaced that building that burned down. But that larger building could hold at least 600 people. That was a pretty good sized building. I think I've got a picture here, a drawing of the building that held the 600 population in attendance, and then this building where we are now, that's Eminence Christian Church as it was then. It's been changed over the years, but it's still standing. They built buildings to last back in the day.
Yeah, you know, better than.
Yeah. This church has been around for well over 150 years now. In 1988, he was 150 years old. That is, let me say this: the congregation was, but this building was built in 1902.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Henry Johnson, a gentleman who came to Lincoln to serve his community, and he not only served it in his professional work, but he became a minister. And I'm told by part of those 600 up there that they're very, very happy with Henry. And that's nice to know. Do you know anything about the genesis, how the veterans recognition program started up there, Henry?
Well, you know we need Marcia here
Yeah.
to really talk. And she's been, and she told me she's come and talked on the program. But since I have been a minister there, we've had the annual breakfast to honor veterans for their military service, men and women. And it's just been a blessing to see. Long before I became a minister at Eminence, the congregation welcomed, honored, and appreciated veteran service. And you, Bill, have come as a guest.
Yeah, I've been privileged to go up there at every one of them, and the last one kind of got to the old fellow a little bit. They sang songs about America, including, of course, the Star Spangled Banner.
Mm-hmm.
And tears rolled down my cheeks when those boys all chipped in on America the Beautiful. It's a wonderful program, and Marcia knows who work. And I don't want to single out Marcia and Marcia alone, because she has a lot of folks in your congregation who do a lot for that. But it's a much appreciated program. The guys kind of look forward to that.
Mm-hmm. The Ladies' Aid Ministry has a large part in the preparation and of the food and getting things ready for this annual event. Marcia's a part of that, but you're right, there are many others involved, as well as the men, to really roll out the red carpet for our veterans in the community.
And so up there at the Eminence Christian Church, how many parishioners do you have typically, and what are some of the ministries and the outreach maybe programs that you have?
Okay, our service averages around 25 to 30, but there are many more on the church rolls over the years, but our services average around 25 to 30 each Sunday morning. Our youth group is small. It's filled with primarily senior citizens right now, and I'm about middle-aged at 74. So that gives you an idea of the age range. But the people love the Lord. They have been serving in this community a lot longer than me, many of them. There have been teachers, farmers and carpenters and people of the land, We're getting ready to start a Bible study on apologetics, which is the defense of the Christian faith. Daryl Stribling from, I don't know if you know him, from Atlanta, is going to be doing the class. It'll run for 8 weeks, beginning the first Thursday in February. And I'm looking forward to that, because it's important to be able to know why you believe what you believe, and then to be able to share that with anyone who may ask.
There's kind of a basic question, Daryl. Daryl. Hello, testing 1, 2. Oh boy, maybe it's time for the old fellow to ask for retirement. But knowing why you believe what you believe, that's a kind of a little simple statement there, but that's the basis for how we react, how we react to our fellow man.
Yes. It's important to know the Bible. If you say you are a believer, well, by what standard do you live? And what is the authority by which you live? And if someone asks you why you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and the Muslim asks, well, then why do you believe that? And why is my God, my faith in Allah, somewhat, not proper, and you say that Christianity is? What is it about Jesus, which they do accept as a prophet, but what is it about Jesus that I should embrace? And knowing a little bit about Islam, knowing what the Bible teaches, if Jesus is your prophet, and I would tell inmates at the prison all the time, you say he's your prophet, then listen to what he says about himself. Because in the Word of God, in the Gospels, he says, before Abraham was, I am. I'm the God that spoke to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am God who wrote the Ten Commandments. See?
Now, in Lincoln County, as you go around our lovely courthouse square, you don't think much of in the way of Islam. Out there at the prisons,
Yes.
I presume that there's a fair amount of inmates out there who are members of the Islam faith.
Without a doubt, yes.
And do you find that your discourse with them a little different than the average Methodist or Presbyterian who's well, surely a Methodist Presbyterian wouldn't be a prisoner.
Well, there are a few. Count on it. Yeah.
I can't think of any Episcopalians. But seriously, in a discourse with a member of the Islamic faith, do you find differences? How about differences of opinion?
Well, that's a open-ended question, of course. Differences of opinion politically, socially, theologically. Certainly there are theological differences. Muslims believe that Jesus is a prophet, born of the Virgin Mary, but not Son of God. For us as Christians, that is central to our faith. It's foundational to what we believe, that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. There are a lot of issues regarding race and history in this country that African Americans have embraced in terms of Christianity being seen more as a white man's religion and certainly not an extension of God's love and grace because of slavery and because of injustices. You talked about reparations. I don't personally think it would make up for all that has happened to African Americans in this country. So that, for me, that it's a non-issue, but for others it is, because Christianity has said, out of one blood God has created all men, and they were all equal in Jesus. We're neither male, female, bondman, or free, but we're all one in Jesus. But when you look at the society at large, that's not quite the historical truth. And so Islam, for some people, has added the idea of self-determination, and for some, an answer that counters what Christianity says it's about, but practices in a different way. And so for many African Americans, it was seen as purely a white man's religion. It was seen as a way of controlling the masses. And like communists believes, religion is the opiate of the people, and it's a way of those in power maintaining power, while those in the bottom are just held in that lower state of existence. And so for me personally, knowing the historical background and context of our society, I understand why I'm a Christian. It has nothing to do with it being a white man's religion. I believe that Jesus is the Christ. He is the Son of God. And for me, it's the faith that he's coming again to make all the things that divides us, getting rid of all that and bringing us together as one people.
Lloyd, I'm in over my head. Seriously. All I know is that I was brought up by a Christian mother and father who made sure I understood what the basics were about. As a matter of fact, I can tell you this day, this is 2023, isn't it? And along about 80-some years ago, I had my mouth washed out with palm-olive soap by my mother. She overheard me using the N-word, and that was not going to happen. And that was 80-some years ago, and I remember to this very day. So those of us who are brought up with people who understand the basics are lucky indeed.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Because what that does, it gives Christianity a positive image and name. We reflect Jesus. If we say we are Christians, then we ought to live that way. One of the Ten Commandments says, God says, thou shalt not take my name in vain. It has nothing to do with speaking. It means to lift high, to lift up. And if we carry the name of Jesus high, like a protester would on a placard, or we wear a T-shirt that says, I'm a believer, I believe that Jesus is the Christ, then that ought to be reflective of how we live. Not to do so is to take the name of Jesus in vain. And so your mother did you a favor in teaching you to be consistent in your faith and how you see people.
I knew it. I never regretted it. Well, I regretted it personally, but I knew she had the right hand.
Yeah, and that's the way I was raised. Out of one blood, God created all people to dwell on the face of the earth.
That's the same mother who was so proud of her being a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and who turned in her membership card when the DAR refused to let Marian Anderson, the great black contralto, sing in Constitution Hall. And my mother got so mad at the DR, she resigned her membership.
Yeah, I would love to have known your mother. Well, she sounded like quite a lady. But think about that, Marian Anderson. I was told, that even in our own Lincoln history, she came, or was it Mahalia Jackson? I can't remember. But she came to Lincoln and was not allowed to stay at Lincoln Hotel. She came to perform at Lincoln College. I think it was
that's a story I never
one
heard.
Of the president there shared that during Martin Luther King's celebration, that she wasn't allowed to stay at Lincoln Hotel. So we say we're a Christian nation, but yet we have this history that says everything but that.
648-5510. We went a little extra work this morning to get Mr. Henry Johnson, one of our retired citizens there. Well, he's not retired. He's still serving Eminence Christian Church in a very active way. But a fellow who worked in the prisons and the correction systems. And you had to meet a lot of different characters, and both in and outside the prison, who served in that capacity. My son was a part of the Department of Correction System for about 30 years before he retired, and he had some instinct, but he never talked about it.
He never talked about it?
Never. No, that was his. That stayed on the prison grounds. Whatever he had, he felt that was sacrosanct. So, Mr. Kirby.
Yes, sir. Present.
When you're talking about religion and philosophy, I'm in so deep over my head. My 99 years are lost.
Well, we talked about the Veterans Breakfast that Eminence Christian Church has.
Yes.
What I'm sure you have some other missions and other programs that you have to serve members of the community.
You bet. The ladies, they host a soup supper, which they invite community peoples to come in. They also cook cookies and send them to the nursing homes.
Oh, okay.
And we have some tremendous bakers.
And we have a caller who has a question or a comment. Go right ahead, please, caller. Put your headset on there, Mr. Johnson.
Okay.
Hang on there, caller, and go ahead now, please.
This is Doris Last. I am from Hartsburg, and I worked with you many years ago at Cutler Hammer.
Oh, I remember Cutler Hammer, yes.
Yes, well, I was working on the aisle with two older women when you came by, and they said, "There goes High Pockets." And I said, "I don't know what that means." Simply because of your size and your color and the freedom your job gave you, they had assumed that you were going around stealing things. So anyway, I stood up for you, and you and I were good friends all the time there. And now I did not know until listening to this program that you are now preaching out there.
I am.
And I am part of the Hartsburg Christian Church became the Prairie Land Christian Church. And even though I do have arthritis in my joints, I am still able to play the piano for those services. And I will soon be 89. and I am still living in my property where I've been for 60 years. I have one of my sons who's never married who is living with me, and he goes to work every day.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate
And
that.
thank you for standing up for me, because when white people stand up against racism, something gets done.
that's true.
That's so true. So thank you, and good to hear from you after all these years.
Okay. All right. Goodbye.
God bless.
Thank you. 648-5510. If somebody else has a personal observation, having worked with Mr. Johnson, or knows about his serving his community and his Lord at Eminence Christian Church. These small, by the way, did the COVID thing affect small Christian churches or whatever denomination around the country, like some of the larger?
Sure. COVID just took us all by surprise.
Yes. Yeah.
And before the vaccines were developed, it was running ripshod across the nation. And because of congregations being where we sing and we embrace, it's hard not to just want to hold on to a brother or sister or sing next to them in choir or in the congregation. That's how COVID was spread, in the early days before the vaccine. So yes, there were numbers of people who were affected by, COVID and the spread of COVID.
And glad we could bring up Mr. Fauci's name, but we might get cut off the air, so we'll bypass that part of it.
Yeah, but let's look at that for a minute. Why was there such a resistance to the vaccines? How in the world did it get politicized? Before the development of the first two vaccine doses, and then the boosters, and then finally the Omicron, people were dying in droves. Nurses and doctors being worn completely out. And I don't understand when you're seeing just the evidence that what this
in front of you.
Yeah, in front of you. And then to have Dr. Fauci or anyone come and say, listen, we're working on a vaccine, or we have been working on a vaccine. The President Barack Obama left the office for pandemic preparedness open to keep, this office in place so that they would be ready for the next virus. That got politicized, and I don't understand. What do you think?
Well, things that happen out there in Washington D.C. are beyond my rate of understanding, and the average person on the street. You walk down Michigan Avenue in Chicago or Broadway in New York, you're going to get the same results. They can't begin to fathom the thinking that goes on out there.
But then it has become saturated in the mindset of people at large. We've taken vaccines for flu, for polio. Remember as kids? They didn't even think about it. You took the vaccine. Now there's a whole generation of people who won't have their kids vaccinated for polio or measles or anything. It baffles me that there's this resistance to just science that has saved our lives. We are reaching old age because our parents had us vaccinated when we were little ones.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore.
I found that rather disconcerting, audience. Mr. Johnson looked right directly in my eyes when he mentioned old age.
Well, you're still breathing. You're still breathing because your mother got you vaccinated, like mine.
And there was no question.
It wasn't even
he just did it.
You did it. My mother used to give me cod liver oil every morning before going to school.
And I hated it.
It's nasty. It was terrible, but it kept me from getting sick.
Yeah.
But now it's this resistance to vaccines, and people are. When COVID hit, nobody was prepared for that.
Yes.
Nobody.
Yeah.
But they found a vaccine that would slow down the progression and would stop filling up the hospitals, and people didn't have to get on respirators. It is still with us, but not nearly at the same rate as before. People just aren't dying as much. So, but it just baffles me how that became so politicized.
Our guest this morning has been Mr. Henry Johnson, who gave up of his time. He's a busy guy, even though he's kind of quasi-retired. He's a busy man. I find it difficult to get Henry off of his routine, and he's kind enough to return my phone call and come up and spend some time with us. We appreciate that, Henry. You're a very much respected man in our community.
Thank you, and I received that blessing. And anytime you ask, I'll clear my calendar for you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for Viewpoint.
The preceding program is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.